if this is the core that Memphis has, give me your position group or player or however you want to break it down that you're the most confident in and the least confident in if Arthur Kaluma ultimately does not end up at Memphis.
Yeah, I think in terms of most confidence, whether Arthur Kaluma plays for Memphis or not, I was always going to say it's the backcourt, right? Whether it's the backcourt of Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty. I think you've got two guys who are legitimately guys that have won, specifically in Tyrese Hunter, that have played high level college basketball and been successful at everywhere he's gone. Right. You've got a guy in PJ Haggerty who is kind of that prototypical big guard that Penny likes to utilize, right? Like he's a big guard who can handle the ball, who clearly caught the eye of a lot of different teams. And the fact that Memphis got him in first, like I think that is a when PJ Haggerty committed to the Tigers, he was the first transfer portal commit for the University of Memphis in the offseason. That to me felt completely different from the previous years of Penny kind of working in the portal, right? Where you remember last year, it was Nick Jourdain. Nick Jourdain was the first guy who committed, and it was like, okay, that's a great piece, right? Like that's a decent piece for Memphis. It's you kind of see what they're trying to build. Like he's a glue guy. Is he gonna be one of your most impactful, most efficient players? I think a lot of fans who had watched Temple were like, man, maybe he's decent, but I loved his game. I was like, this is a low key, a big get for Memphis. But obviously Nick Jourdain is not going to move the needle a ton when it comes to like wins and losses for the Tigers. Them getting PJ Haggerty this year first was a needle mover to the highest degree, I think, in terms of what kind of expectations for this team. And so I would suspect that even with the David Jones not returning to the program, staying in the draft, I am still as comfortable and confident about this team because of PJ Haggerty and because of Tyrese Hunter. In terms of weakness, depth, maybe just off the bench depth. I think not having David and if they don't land Arthur Kaluma, not having Arthur Kaluma, I think then depth becomes an issue. But I would also counter that and say we probably won't be hearing over the season, why is Penny playing 12 players, right? Like, why is he playing 10 players? Like, shorten his rotations. Well, now it's kind of forced to if they don't have the horses off the bench to be able to come in and produce. So I think maybe bench depth is where I would be most concerned, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for a Penny Hardaway team.
No, and I can basically rinse and repeat with the strength of the roster, and I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. It's kind of the obvious point, and I don't even think you can really make a counterpoint to it as far as, but I mean, you can like what they have in the front court with Tyreek Smith, Musa Cisse, Dane Danger, Nick Jordan. Like, you can like what they have in those guys, but it's not going to match up with the firepower of Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty, and also Colby Rogers as well in the backcourt. I think the biggest area of weakness, if they don't land Arthur Kaluma, is at the wing position, at the four. Like, they don't have anyone that you feel like overly confident about that is that, long 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" guy that can play defense, that can score in multiple ways. Like, they don't have that. Now, can they shape shift somebody into that position? Can they play a bigger guard at the three? Can they play a smaller four at the three? Yes. But as far as having like a true game changing wing, they don't have that without Arthur Kaluma. That to me would be the biggest weakness, because you're missing a big piece, because at this point with David Jones not in the fold, like, Arthur Kaluma is that guy that they're kind of putting all their eggs in one basket on and saying, this guy's going to come in and fill this role, play big minutes, and do what he's done throughout his career, be able to be an effective scorer offensively, and be able to do multiple things, guard multiple positions, and be kind of a chess piece defensively as well. So I think the strength is kind of a no-brainer, but you can go different directions with the weakness. And if you don't get Arthur Kaluma, then what do you really have as far as a true wing goes?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you look for a team and you look for like kind of prototypical sizes for each position. And I would say, more than likely if David had returned, he would have probably played the 3 position on this roster, and he's 6'3", 6'3.5", right? But I mean, in terms of talent, he's a much bigger talent, a much, more effective, ball scorer. But you got a guy like Colby Rogers, who I think if Penny had his way and had his, had his dream roster for this next year, I think Colby was the guy that would have come off the bench, and backed up either David Jones or Arthur Kaluma. But if obviously you don't have David, if you don't get Arthur, then clearly it looks like Colby would have to come off the bench and start. You're talking about a guy who has played multiple years of college basketball and been incredibly effective and efficient wherever he's gone. And so you're talking about adding a high volume, high efficiency 3-point shooter into the lineup. And that's good. Like that's what you need. But then what you do then is you struggle with, okay, well, someone's got to rest at some point, right? Like someone's got to, what if foul troubles or even injuries, God willing, that doesn't happen. But you look at, I don't necessarily get all that bent out of shape in college basketball about size issues, especially on the wings, because, the way that defenses are played and the way that you can scheme out defenses, you can kind of hide players just like they did with Tyler Harris a few years ago. Right. You can kind of hide dudes on defense, but I think definitely that should be a concern. But no offense to this guy, but Jaquan Walton was the prototypical 3. And when he came, struggled mightily doing what he doing, playing that role. And anyway, so yeah, I definitely think that the strengths are pretty clear what this team is. I do think not getting David out of the draft and then potentially not having Arthur Kaluma on this roster definitely, does it lower the ceiling for you in terms of like expectations for this team?
Yeah, it has to. I think pretty naturally it does. Just what he, like I kind of said, what he offers, his versatility on both sides of the floor, and to me, really filling that final piece. Because yes, can you mask certain players with who you put around them on the floor and the way that you have your rotations and lineups set up? Absolutely, but how much better is it when you don't have to do that? Like when you don't have to have someone playing out of position, or when you're not asking someone to make up for slack, whatever that, if it's based on defensive ability or size or whatever the case may be. It's a whole lot easier if you just have that piece and you don't have to cover for it. So I think, yeah, the overall upside definitely goes down. It's not as high without him because he fills a role that they need to have filled that they don't have.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this. Penny mentioned this in the first, they're doing that Tiger Tours or Tiger Tales Tours or whatever. And they did their first meet and greet out in Collierville, and they were asking about Nick Jourdain. Fans were asking about Nick. And Penny said that he expects to see Nick play at the wing position, the 3.
Right. Yeah.
He's in.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, is that a wise move? Do you think Nick could his game could translate? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't hate it. I think that's something that he experimented with last year, and it wasn't ineffective. Like it worked fine. So it's kind of one of those things, once again, that if that's the necessity, if that has to happen, like if Nick Jourdain is your starting 3, then I think you're okay. Like I don't think it's going to be this massive hole that causes Memphis to lose multiple games. But I keep going back to the well of, if you have someone that fits that role and everybody can play in their natural position, And Nick Jourdain is a bit of a tweener because he's not the biggest guy. And so if he does come off the bench and back up someone at the 4, or he comes in off the bench if Arthur Kaluma is there and backs him up at the 3, like, you feel better about playing a player out of position if they're not the guy getting the lion's share of the minutes. If it is a guy that's coming in as a rotational guy or coming off the bench, you just feel much more confident in that. So I think he's capable, and I think Memphis will be fine if that's, whether it's Kobe Rogers, whether it's Nick Jourdain. Like, I think they're fine either
Right.
way. But
Right.
I think the ceiling is just raised so much if you have Arthur Kaluma, and that's even past the positional need that I feel that they have there. It's just based off of who he is as a player. Like, even if Nick Jourdain had primarily played at the 3 last year and was really solid the whole year, you would still say that Arthur Kaluma raises the
Yeah.
ceiling of this team and his abilities.